Welcome to the Path Pavers podcast.
All right, so I think you get the gist that I'm looking for a specific type of individual. Their profession doesn't matter. It's really their connection with it and relationship to it. Because I believe that if we have a profession that we have no relationship or connection with, it impacts our life in a pretty profound way. I mean, imagine doing something for 40 or 50 hours a week you hate, or you don't feel like you can express yourself in.
Right.
I mean, and so like when I see people that are depressed or anxious or lost, it doesn't surprise me, right? Because you're spending so much time doing something that is not you. And so the purpose of this podcast is to test this hypothesis, like, and to learn obviously other aspects of it, of the, of elements maybe I'm overlooking. And so these structured questions are on purpose. From the 18 I have outlined, I picked 7 based on the context of, what I know about the individual and what I think is going to be the most interesting for you as well. All right, let's do it. So the first question is, how we define something is telling. It begins to highlight our identity and who we are. So in your own words, what do you do and what is your profession?
Yeah. So I am a photographer. Thinking about like the meat of what I do, is I primarily serve small businesses and entrepreneurs. So it has been a long journey to get to this point. I've dabbled in a lot of different niches, but I find the most enjoyment working with small businesses and entrepreneurs because kind of going back to like paving away, you kind of got to be a little crazy to like leave a steady job, maybe great benefits and whatever, and like pursue something that you have no idea if it's going to work out. So I know that I have 2 children that I physically had, but then I've always considered my business like my third baby. I've put in damn near an equal amount of time and energy into my business that I have to like raising my kids. So when I meet other entrepreneurs, it's always kind of similar, that similar feeling. And I meet so many people who have this like vision for their brand and their business, but they just don't have either the equipment or the knowledge or education or tools to execute it. So I find that my business ends up being a lot more collaborative. But I love that because I feel like I'm able to help other people pursue their dreams, and really give like a visual appeal to their business or brand that they identify with.
When did you, and this is going a little bit off script, but you just said so many interesting things there. When did you decide to kind of take this crazy leap of faith? Like, what was like the final straw? You're like, I'm going to do it. So I'm sure you've thought about it, right? And you're like, maybe not yet. Maybe the timing's not right. But like, what was the final tipping point for you where you're like,
It's time. It's so crazy. So I graduated from the Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design with my bachelor's degree in photography in 2015. My mom is a retired teacher, so it was like you gotta go to college, and I met a boy. I moved to Hollywood. I'm like, I'm gonna be a photographer. Like it's just random out the blue. 18 years old. And when I finally graduated in 2015, I was working in retail management. And it's so crazy because I spent all this time and all this money getting, like the best education to be like set up for success. But at no point in my schooling years did I ever consider running a business, which is wild because it's like, maybe that is why we're seeing such like low statistics when it comes to like art students. So in 2015, when I graduated, I was working a seasonal job at a retail store. And I fell in love with the job. I love the culture. They really appreciated everyone at every level. They let you be yourself. The more you were yourself, the more they liked you. And they were really empowering. They provided their employees with a lot of tools for success. So I stayed, and within a year, I became a manager, and I stayed there for 5 years. And I love this job so much. I'm like, I'm a lifer. Like it's always going to be me in this company. And I got to travel and it was amazing. I learned so much about running a business from a managerial side that I never learned in school. And the other amazing thing about this company I work for is they offered extended maternity leaves. So like in 2018, I found out I was pregnant with my son, and I was working for this store in Kansas City. And if I stayed, I would get a 10-month paid maternity leave. So I worked up until the end of my pregnancy, and it was very important for me to come back to Milwaukee. My mom is here, and I am a single parent, so I definitely am. I am not a baby person. Like, it was a whole new world. Changed my first diaper with my son, like crazy. But when I left Kansas City, they let me know, when you're done, you either have to relocate if there's no job in Milwaukee, or you have to quit. And I was like, that's fine. I was so confident something would open up locally. And at the end of my 10 months, nothing opened locally. And they told me that I could relocate or I could stay in Milwaukee and take a demotion. I would be working under two people with less experience, and I would be making 50% of my salary from before. And I couldn't take it because I had hired, trained, promoted, and worked with people who were getting free $4 an hour more than what they offered. So it felt like a little bit of a slap in the face. So at that time, my son was 10 months old, and I was back in Milwaukee for about 10 months, and some old clients knew I was back. So I was making maybe like $1,000 a month doing pictures. I thought about it, and I'm like, I've had my degree for almost 5 years. I've never actually given this a real shot. It's just been like a side gig. What will happen? And then here we are, and it'll be 5 years in December. So that's how I got started. So would I have ever quit my job? I don't know, but I'm so glad I did.
Well, congratulations. That's incredible. Being first and foremost, being a single mom literally seems impossible. I have two little girls. I have, and my wife does majority of the lifting, but I'm there to help, and I have an incredible amount of respect for you. I really don't understand it. Like, it's so much, and it never ends. And on top of that, having a business, like you said, it's another baby, but this baby, and I don't know where in maturity your business baby is, but man, in the beginning, is it a lot.
Yes.
That baby never sleeps.
Ever.
But I can relate to a lot of the experiences in your story. I worked for a company for a long time that gave me amazing experience and education, stuff that you would never learn in school. I thought I'd be there for a long time. Some things changed, and then the way I was treated, when the things changed, does hurt, because you're like, man, I invested so much time and effort, and you feel a part of it. And then to see that when you're no longer, I don't want to say valuable to them, because I think we were both still valuable, but you were no longer convenient, maybe would be the right word, or you didn't fit their narrative anymore. They were like, well, we'll find someone else, instead of being like, well, let's work together. We're kind of in this. I know we don't usually do this, but in this case, an exception should be made.
Right.
And so it was very relatable. And maybe, in a different time when you and I get together, I'll tell you the details of my story, but this podcast is about you. So
I would love to hear.
Moving on to the next question. It's a good one. So question 2. So I'll start off with a quote by Booker T. Washington, and that kind of sets up the question and gives you a little bit of context for you to answer it. I have learned success is to be measured not so much by the position one has reached in life as by the obstacles which an individual has overcome while trying to succeed. What are the obstacles you have overcome that you're most proud of?
So like I said, when I started my business, my son was 10 months old, and I was doing it alone. Like, no, I don't know what to expect. I feel like my son was almost a year when I got my LLC. Being a parent and an entrepreneur, kind of intertwined. Like, I don't know one without the other. And I think some of my most challenging obstacles were, or have been, like that first. I mean, the struggle never ends. Like, the more money, more problems is real, but definitely like a financial struggle. My parents tried their best, but I didn't have any sort of like financial education. I didn't have a savings account after I graduated high school. Took out a ton of student loans without even really understanding what the repercussions were. That first year my son was born, I really learned about a lot of my mistakes. Because when you don't have money to spend, you start thinking about where's your money going. So I started investigating like some credit card debt and not realizing how much interest a 30% credit card is for what I bought some new shoes that are like stupid stuff that was like didn't make any sense. And here I am making a limited income or not knowing when I'll get income when I started my business. And I'm paying off like this dumb retail credit card. Like things like that have really been eye opening to me. Or I would say, you have your first really good couple months of business and you're like, this is great. It's only up from here. It has to be only up from here. And then the next month you make money. And it's like, well, shit. But definitely stuff like that. There's being a single parent. I am a single income household. And then how banks base your like loan eligibility is on your income, and then it's also on when you're self-employed, it's your last 2 years of tax returns. So then it has to average 2 years. So that took a while to build up. And like the first year I made like $13,000. Like it took a while to get that. And it's still a struggle. And now I'm at a point in my business, still learning, still growing, still learning from mistakes, but it's different. So I'm doing a lot of outsourcing now. So it's needing people for jobs. And even though I'm getting paid, I have to have enough money to sustain my lifestyle at home on my own income that my business brings in. But I also need to be able to pay my hair and makeup artist to order products to do. So it's kind of like a flat line. In the beginning of my business, it was like, once I hit six figures, and then you hit six figures, and you're like, okay, it's a new ballgame. Like there's way more things to pay now. And over the last few years, I remember and feel each and every struggle, but there's always been something like you're gonna be okay. And it shows up in the most random places. Like I had to learn a lot about money blocks. Why I was just making enough like job to job money, and that also came with a price increase. So understanding my value to get over these money blocks. Basically going through that and having to learn just so much more about money when that's something you haven't been prepared for, and it's like a continuous struggle that we all encounter in some way, shape, or form.
When you said the one thing that did stand out to me because I experienced something similar is understanding your value and pricing. Walk me through your thought process or mindset. Did you change your values, or did you always have them? You just didn't express them in the pricing or your services. How did you solve that, I guess, situation or obstacle?
Yeah. The nice thing about the retail company that I work for, they are a luxury cosmetics brand. So I was selling, 40 to $50 bottles of lotion that were smaller than this. But understanding the value of the product, so you're able to talk about that with customers. So I love that. I love the branding of the company I work for, and they really meant what they believed, and that was inspiring. So when I started my business, I looked around at other people who I knew that were like well known in photography, and I saw what they were charging. It's like $250 for a session where you get 30 pictures in 1 hour. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have tiers. I'm gonna have a low point, that sweet middle spot, and then a really high one where like if they book the high one, oh my god, holy shit, like that's great. And my high one when I started, probably about a year in, was about $500. So I did a job for a company, and they picked my highest package, and I want to say it was like $575. It came with 40 edited photos, and then it came with like a 2 or 4 hour session. And I loved it. I loved working with them. The work was fun. It was something that I enjoyed. But when I sat down and like really figured out the dollar amount of what I was making $9 an hour. So that was something that I had to think about as like, okay, this isn't it. But then there's a budget market, a middle market, and a luxury market. And so similar to what we're seeing with a lot of these like middle market retail stores, Like they're not surviving because they're not pricing what they could be or what they're worth, and they're not cheap enough to be like a budget store. So I started doing some research on luxury photography, and it's all about increasing your service level to also match your pricing. So you wouldn't jump from like $250 to $2,500 without increasing your service level in some way. So several years ago now, I started incorporating professional hair and makeup artists. I do pre-shoot style consultations with all my clients where I go to their homes and I meet them before. I never photograph somebody I haven't met with, at least on Zoom. Can't book a shoot unless we talk on the phone. So adding some of these things into my business has helped me get to a point where I'm weeding out some of the clientele that isn't right for me. So it's nice now to work with people who understand the value of the product and the service because they see all the work that goes into it because it's shown through the customer service experience. So now I would say on average a client of mine spends about $3,200. And that ranges sometimes that could be like a boudoir session, or it could be a business shoot, or it can be a family session. Those are my top three, as well as headshots that I do. So, but I love it. I spend about 20 to 40 hours with each client. And I genuinely feel like I'm friends with my clients when I'm done. And just having that start to finish full service experience is something a lot of people need. And I think photography gets a bad rep. We all have cameras on our phones, so everyone's a photographer, right? So it's just kind of like everybody can do it, but what makes you do it differently is something that I've implemented over the last few years.
I did not expect that. I'm going to be honest.
Okay.
Going from 500 to 32 is a nice jump.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm a huge fan.
Took a long time.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Of course, right? I mean, I don't think you just woke up one day and you're like, well, let's just try this number
And
out.
not everyone spends that much either, so you never know. I got a little something for everybody.
Of course. But I appreciate that greatly because I think what you do has a certain level of clientele that is seeking that. I've done, family photo shoots where it's just like in and out, right? I mean, they're trying to get as many individuals as they can again, and I have no complaints. We got what we wanted, they got what they wanted, but it wasn't like a memorable experience. It was like, hey, it's just 30 minutes, get as many shots as you can, and we'll go to Culver's and get ice cream afterwards, and so, but it would be kind of cool to have something that was a little bit more thoughtful, more of an experience, something that we didn't dread to get over with. Where I felt like, oh, it's like a necessary evil in a way. Like, you're going to want these pictures or memories later. And we do. And I always love them when they come out, but I never am excited to do them. And we also have, and it's been interesting, is like we're very lucky that we have a nice property where we live on. And I can never get photographers to come out here and take pictures because they want to be at their location so that they can get many bookings, right? Because before me and after me, and maybe all day, they have like 8 people at one location. So now you have a limited time. Your pictures are relatively going to be the same as everyone else's because it's the same location, same pose. You know what I mean? And then there's a lack of, I think, authenticity of capturing that family's moment. And I think being on our on our property and where we live, I've always yearned for that. And I always tell my wife, I'm like, well, why don't we just do that? She's like, this is just quick and it's easy, and I get it, but I can appreciate where your level of thought towards the experience of the individual, whether it's a professional or a family or I think you call them boudoir. Is that how we say this?
Yep.
So I greatly appreciate that. Nailed it, right? Very cool. And I can imagine someone who's not, who doesn't take a lot of pictures, but understands the importance of it. You probably calm them. You probably get a lot more authentic side of them. They don't feel like they have to do these awkward poses that isn't a reflection of who they are. I feel like I can tell when individuals get a photographer like you versus, I think, photographers that are a little bit more numbers oriented from a volume standpoint, because all of our pictures look the exact same, where all of these pictures look as a reflection of their brand, which I think you mentioned in the first question. All right, question number 3. and you kind of touched on this in question 2, so we could piggyback off of it. What are general rules of thumb in your profession that are wrong, misunderstood, or dangerous?
These are really good questions. Um, I mean, yeah, it does kind of go back to the last one when it comes to like pricing, and I do think that somebody a canvas and paints cost one price, right? It's price match somewhere or something. But when somebody creates a painting, they can value it whatever, and sometimes the higher the value is, you look. I mean, I went to art school, so I looked at a lot of paintings. Where I'm like, oh, but then some of these things sell for like millions and millions of dollars. So the question of like what should art be priced at, and I think that with photography, because we live in such a digital age, is that our images are not living in print as much as they would be. It kind of loses that like art form because it comes more like a convenience. And I think that there are some photographers like in the industry that can be, I don't want to say problematic, because there are hobbyists and then there are professionals, and there are some people who want a budget friendly photographer and that works for them and their family, their lifestyle. But then there are other people who want more of like a high end luxury experience. But I think that sometimes we call them shoot and burners, because you shoot and you run and you burn out. It's just not a sustainable way to make a living with photography. And I think it is problematic because I think it sets these expectations that just aren't realistic for anybody. And then they come up later on. So my clients are wonderful. Everyone is so understanding. Everyone I work with has been fantastic. The people who I do consults with that don't end up booking with me, all fantastic. Like we all leave at like, this was great, I'm glad we connected. And that isn't happening in photography that much anymore. So I think that is problematic. I also think it can be dangerous in some ways. I do see ways in my industry that people are paying deposits without any, like the service doesn't happen, or people are posting, or it's taking 90 days to get your photos back and you haven't heard from this photographer for whatever reason. I see that posted so much in like mom photo groups. That's the issue, is it's like this burning out, and that can be dangerous. And I mean, like I said, everybody has like a different level of service, but I think that photographers who really love what they do and truly want to serve their client and give them like a good experience and not just some photos, there's some things that they can do to like change the way people look at this industry.
Shoot and burners. Never heard that, but that's pretty fitting. And they seem to pop up around the most convenient times of year, like Mother's Day or the holidays, and that's when I see them getting really popular and popping up. But I think there's a clientele for that. I think there's some people that are totally happy with the price point, the quick in and out. And so I think there's a lot of value for that category.
Totally agree.
But I think, but the way you approach photography, I think is, like you said, more of a professional standpoint, where this is more hobbyist. And that distinction to me wasn't obvious coming out, because I assume that anyone who charges for something is at a minimum level a professional, right? At some minimal points. And then I think a hobbyist at a minimal point can make money, but it's not, I think, the primal motivation. It's almost like, if I go do something, I enter a tournament or something like that, and it's like I'm just doing it for fun, but I win first place and I get like a gift card, or something like that. That would be the more hobbyist. But I think the delineation that you just outlined for me, like the shooter and burners, which are more hobbyist, but I think sometimes get misunderstood as being professionals, where you're the more professional route, where like this is what it would look and feel like, and that's why this cost is different. Question 4. You've done a great job answering these questions, and you've been so thoughtful with your answers that this question 4 might be hard to answer because I think you already did. And so if we want to just continue to piggyback off of what you're saying, don't feel like you have to change it. So it starts off with a quote: "An expert is a person who has made all the mistakes that can be made in a narrow field." What mistakes do most avoid making that you believe? holds them back from reaching a world-class level?
Yeah, I think it goes back to not understanding our own value. And that can be any industry. I also think a lot of times in every industry, what I see often is people comparing themselves to other people. No one is you. There's always going to be somebody doing something different, doing whatever it could be, maybe better, but like nobody is you. So I think a lot of times we as people just forget that human connection is so important. Like you can make or ruin someone's day in one simple conversation. So I think people get held back. COVID didn't help anyone's social anxiety, so it prevents us from like going to events and putting ourselves out there. And something that my mom always has said to me my whole life, which has sometimes gotten me in trouble, but she always has said like the worst somebody is going to say is no. And I think people avoid reaching out or putting themselves out there or whatever it could be because they're, we all have our own shit that we deal with as far as like our confidence and insecurities, things like that. But I think just people putting themselves out there, like, don't be scared. No one really knows what they're doing.
I think that's the biggest secret. As you see something and you think like, oh man, this person's got it all figured out, whether they have money or the right family or whatever the case be. But like, we're all at a point or at some aspect of our life that we just could not be more lost in, or more confused. And I find the differences is the individuals that are okay with that. They don't expect to know everything. They don't expect to have everything figured out, but they're willing to do the work or make the effort, expend the energy to figure it out. Like one of my best friends taught me this recently. He's got a few businesses and he's never shy to ask for help. And I don't know, when I first started off, I would feel a little bit shy to ask for help because it's providing evidence that maybe I wasn't prepared, providing evidence to like the external world that maybe I'm not qualified to do this or any type of negative connotation that could go along with it. But at the end of the day, the fact that you can ask for help or you know what kind of help to ask for, I think is the exact opposite of what I thought it would look like. Because whenever he asks me for help, one, it makes me feel really good because I'm so happy that he has the courage to ask me and I want to help him because I love him. And then second, it makes me really respect him because his mission to create the businesses the way he wants them and this like obstacle that he needs to get over, he recognizes that he needs help and he's like, I would much rather be vulnerable in this moment and survive and get over this obstacle and get my business to where it needs to go than to be too confident or too egotistical to not have the courage to ask for help, fail, and then realize the ripple effect that'll happen. Because I have employees, I have other business partners and other people and investors. So it's like, be vulnerable for a second, ask for help, learn something, get past it, or, you know, choke on your pride in a way and then have a negative ripple effect that impacts more people. And so to your point, to just, expand on, it's like most people at some point in the process don't know what they're doing. Like for me, like the simplest things, like starting an LLC, I got one of my good buddies sent me like a document. It took me like 10 hours to figure out even where to start. I read his document. I started in like 30 minutes. I was like, I should have just called you
It's so easy
yesterday.
once you
It
do
would
it.
have saved me
Yeah,
an entire day.
yeah,
It's so
so
easy.
easy.
But like for someone like me who's you're questioning it, you're nervous,
It's everyone.
you're reading all this, you're overthinking it. And so to your point, and that's where a lot of my passion comes from, like paving your own career path. It's like I think at one point in time, following a traditional career path was probably the right and the safest and probably for most people the right route to go. But today I don't necessarily feel like that's true, right? I feel that today we have so many opportunities and so many different options with technology and lack of barriers into certain professions where there used to be a barrier there. I mean, you could take photography for one, right? Like you can buy a used camera, watch a bunch of YouTube videos, and actually become a pretty proficient photographer on your own. Maybe 20 years ago, that would not be the case. Maybe you'd have to find an apprenticeship or something of that nature. But I want to encourage people to pursue their interests and curiosities and try to become professional in it. And if that's going to school, fine. If that's doing it your own way, fine. If that's to me, it doesn't matter what your path is, as long as you're the one doing it. Like, you're abiding by your own. And so I definitely can appreciate those sentiments. And the comparing aspect's hard. I don't think social media makes that much easier, but I also think social media offers a lot of value. So, I think they're just trade-offs. All right, moving on to our sixth question. What work do you do that you know is important, but you rarely ever want to do it?
Ha ha ha! Everything. I'm just kidding. Oh man,
It's funny, I asked Chloe that question before, and she's like, every single thing I do right now.
like where do I start? I thought it was gonna be like, what do I do that I love or something, and I was like, oh, okay.
No, that'd be too hard. Yeah.
The first thing I ever outsourced is accounting. I have ADHD, numbers and stuff like that. Not for me, not a thing I want to mess up. I still found a way to mess up tax stuff anyway, but it's like, you go a year living your life in luxury, don't pay any taxes. You learn not to do that next year. So like that is a fun part of entrepreneurship. I've learned the hard way. So that is one thing, but it's on the point. Like I hired my accountant the year I started my business, and I just was so like I don't want to deal with it. This is what I'm paying you. That I lost total sight of what am I spending money on? Like how do I set up a budget if I haven't set that up? Like I didn't have eyes on it, and I always would hear these quotes about I don't know if I heard it in some rap song or something, but it was about having other people sign checks for you. Like you're so busy you can't even sign your own checks. And I'm like, that's crazy. Like when I get a check, I can't wait to cash it. Like I can't wait till one day that's my life. But it made me think about how wait, I'm not cashing checks I don't know about, but do I really know my bank transactions? Because I have somebody sorting those, and I trust her. I love her. She's amazing. But I really do believe in the power of you knowing what's going on in your business. So that's a big one that I don't like to do, but I do it. I need to meet with her. I pay sales tax monthly now. So we meet once a month and I pay a lot of money. And that's what it's like. But I would also say my website, like being a photographer, I'm always creating new content. And I'd like to think my work gets better the more I shoot. So it's like a constant need to be refreshed. That is something I do not like to do. I do have a web designer, but it's just I gotta download and upload the pictures, the most simplest thing. Those are my two biggest ones. I enjoy just about everything, but those two, social media too sometimes, but I do enjoy it. It's just doing it.
And I like this question because everyone has a different answer.
Yeah.
Right? Like some people love the numbers and they're like, it's so fun for me and I keep my business nice and tight. Some people love the website aspect. Some people love the social media aspect. Everyone has their own, but what's fun to hear is that there's always going to be something that's important that you don't like to do. And so there's no getting away from that. And I think that's part of, and outside of owning your own business, this might be even if you work with somebody, you're a freelancer or an employee, whatever type of profession, I think understanding that there's no such thing as, I think, an interesting job or a job that you really care about that doesn't come along with some baggage, right? I mean, even as a parent, it's the greatest, gift, the greatest job in the world, or responsibility, any way you want to categorize it. But there are plenty of days that I'm just I do not want to do this. My youngest daughter is in a little bit of a sleep regression right now. She hasn't slept her entire 2.5 years, so I don't even know if you want to call it a regression. But I had to sleep on the floor, just touching her, so she knew I was kind of there. And that's not necessarily ideal, right? But at the end of the day, it's a minimal, cost for all the other beautiful moments, and so I it's always fun to hear that question. I relate to you. Accounting, thank you. Website design, thank you. Then it goes with this, not to social media, but the uploading of all the data and the video and then merging them and then making a finished product.
Everyone.
I'm so bad
It
at it.
takes forever. Like a real.
Final question for you. This is my favorite question. I feel like I have an idea who I think you're going to answer, but let's see if I'm right. Do you have heroes? Who are they? Tell me what you are attracted to or what you admire about them.
That is a great question. I do. So I would say one of them has always been my mom. So my mom is has been a single parent for most of my life, and there are not many selfless people in this world anymore. Everyone in some way, not everyone, but most people, we got to look out for ourselves, which we totally do. But throughout my life, I have done some crazy things. I've made some mistakes, and my mom has always shown me like unconditional love. When I was 18, and I'm like, I'm moving to California to be a photographer, and like I used to cry at sleepovers as a kid. My mom was like, "You got this." So I think having that, like, she's always like trusted me in a way, and I hope to be that way with my children too. To give them the space to do the thing. I mean, she still would. I mean, to this day, she still complains at me about a whole bunch of different things that I could be, should be, would have did, or whatever. But like that's just being a mom, I think sometimes. But I would say my mom, and she inspires me to take risks, and the worst they're gonna say is no. So I would say my mom's my.
Anyone outside of your mom that comes to mind that inspires you in your work, the way you carry yourself as a professional?
Yeah, there's quite a lot of people. I would say it's hard to pin down just a few. So something that I think, like coming full circle with all the other questions, when I did make that price increase, I started working with people who really understood the investment of their business. And I work with so many inspiring business owners. And the crazy thing is, none of them realize how awesome they are. Or like I work with regularly like nonprofit founders winning awards and stuff, and they like shout out to Megan Johnson and Milwaukee Diaper Mission. Like she's won so many awards in the last year, all so well deserved, but she's just so like humble. And Tiffany Miller, another client of mine, is amazing poet. She's so talented. She like lights up a room. Like I could name something about every person who I've worked with that has inspired me. Um, and I'm just so grateful to work with so many badass motherfuckers. Like they're all awesome. Everyone's all my clients stuff. They are my heroes.
That might be the coolest answer we'll ever get on this podcast. If you're in a profession that you love and you can express yourself authentically in it, and then you get paid by people that inspire you, I mean, that seems to be perfection from my perspective. Because it's no fun to have a client, even regardless of how much they're paying you, that you just don't like, or you don't respect them, or you despise them, or you feel that you need them for the money, and this is probably from an employee standpoint, because I used to be in sales, where it's like you get these clients and you need to make the sale because you've got to hit your quota, and it is part of your job and your responsibility. I mean, these people are paying you to do this, but man, you can't wait for that meeting to be over with. You can't wait for that project to be done with, or you dread seeing that email come in from them or that phone call, and like, almost you feel it in your stomach, in your pit. And for you to have the exact opposite, for you to light up and to get to express and do your profession to individuals that you love and admire and inspire you. I mean, I think that's the goal. And that's not very easy to do. It's hard because one, you got to have the courage to have a niche. You're like, I'm going to go and do it more luxury. I'm going to create better level of service. I'm going to really think about the experience. So that takes some courage because you're cutting out a lot of low-hanging fruit by going a more premium route.
And that's scary.
And like you said, you're going to have some months that, like, oh, I could have done 10 shoot and burners, and made money, but Instead, I'm holding out, staying authentic, because if I keep going back and forth, I'm going to send the wrong messaging. It's going to be really hard to get premium clients if I keep dipping back into
It's not
this.
fair.
So it's a huge leap of faith, and that's awesome. I think that would be, that wasn't a clear cut objective or goal of mine, but now that you said that, that is. Like, I've always just wanted to work with interesting people on interesting things. That's as simple as, like, I really don't care what the domain is, what the profession is, but if the person is interesting and the project is interesting, I'm it. But I like expanding that a little bit more to reflect what you just shared with me, to work with clients that I admire, am inspired by as well. I think that's great criteria to have, and I can only imagine the greatness that comes out of that type of collaboration. So I'm sure the individuals feel that from you, and then vice versa, the product that you're going to give to them is probably going to be as good as it possibly can be. So thank you for sharing that.
I mean,
That's
I
great.
feel like we might have that in common where I feel like, yes, I take pictures, but a lot of the conversations you and I are having are conversations I have with my clients. And we don't think about, it's hard to find time to reflect when you're in the hustle and bustle of being an entrepreneur. So I really appreciate y'all inviting me and having me here and giving me some space to just ramble about.
Absolutely. You were awesome. I love artists of all kinds, right? And you're gonna laugh. Like, I studied Bob Ross for like a few months. I watched him every day. He was just like on my TV. I would just turn my TV on, and he just happened to be on it. And there was something really cool. Like, I didn't know, his story. I didn't know much about his painting technique or style, the wet on wet painting. I wasn't, and it was really cool to then go down this path and learn about him as an artist. And then I just appreciate anyone that finds the courage to express themselves in a certain manner, whether that's art or athletics or even business or application coding. And so from you seeing a photographer that goes about your profession in a manner that you believe is right, and then producing the types of work you produce is like, you're like my hero, right? And I admire it because I know how hard it is. It is very hard. And then, being a single mother and all the other stuff you're juggling, it's so fun. It's fun to see people living life on their own accord, right? And as crazy as it is, and as many days as you're like, what am I doing? It's still cool. It's cool to
Well,
see.
I appreciate that. And to go back to one of your other questions, though, like, I have had to deal with like terrible people, and I have gone days where there was like $1.12 in my bank account, where I have thought many days every day, maybe I should get a job. And I think that's what sets people apart too. Is it takes so long, and you have to be so consistent. The first like at least 5 years. I'm almost 5 years in. I still need to be consistent, but once you like hit a point where you're recognizable in your market, wherever you are, like it's just that consistency that really makes the magic.
I think you're right, because you're undeniable. You're undeniable. After 5 years, it's like you might have your own opinion, but I've gathered enough evidence that your opinion is just that. The evidence gathered is what's real, So